Imagine showing up to work on a normal Friday night. Then, at exactly 1:07 in the morning, the entire building explodes beneath your feet. Within seconds, flames race through every floor, walls collapse, and people are forced to jump from windows just to survive. This wasn't a movie, this really happened in California, and it would become known as the crime of the century. On October 1st, 1910, around 100 employees were working overnight inside the headquarters of Los Angeles Times newspaper. Without warning, a suitcase bomb hidden in the alley beside the building exploded. The bomb contained 16 sticks of dynamite connected to a simple alarm clock. The explosion ripped through the basement before igniting barrels of printing ink and gas lines. Within moments, the six-story building was completely engulfed in flames. Workers became trapped behind collapsing walls. Some escaped into rooftops. Others jumped from upper floors' windows. Many never made it out. By sunrise, 21 people were dead, and more than 100 others had been injured. At the time, it was one of the deadliest criminal attacks in American history. The first question investigators asked was simple: who would do something like this? At first, some people believed it had been a gas explosion, but investigators quickly discovered something far more sinister. The explosion had been intentional. The newspaper publisher, Harrison Gray Otis, was one of the most outspoken opponents of labor unions in the country. For years, tensions between businesses and labor organizations had been growing. Violence had already occurred in several cities, but nothing on this scale. One of America's most famous detectives, William G. Burns, was brought into the investigation. He carefully compared bomb components and tracked all alarm clocks and batteries that were involved in this bombing, interviewed witnesses, and connected the bombing to a nationwide series of attacks on non-union construction projects. After months of investigation, the evidence pointed to two brothers, James B. McNamara and John G. McNamara, members of the International Association of Bridge and Structural Iron Workers. Authorities believe James planted the bomb while John helped organize the campaign. The trial became one of the biggest legal stories in America. Thousands believed the brothers were innocent. Labor unions across the country raised money for their defense. Even legendary attorney Clarence Darrow agreed to represent them. But as the evidence mounted, everything changed. Rather than continue the trial, James pleaded guilty to carrying out the bombing. He admitted placing the suitcase filled with dynamite beside the newspaper building. He later claimed he never intended to kill anyone. But the judge rejected that argument. James received a life sentence. John pleaded guilty in a separate bombing case and was sentenced to 15 years in prison. The bombing shocked the entire nation. It changed public opinions about labor violence and severely damaged the American labor movement for years afterward. More than a century later, historians still consider the Los Angeles Times bombing one of the most significant criminal cases in California history. It wasn't just because of the explosion, it was because one act of violence changed politics, journalism, and labor relations across the entire country. And that's why, more than 100 years later, the bombing is still remembered as one of California's darkest days.